got a slightly different setup just because I figured since we're talking UFOs, we should keep an eye on the sky a little bit there. Let me know if anything is about to beam me up. I mean, I'm game for it. I'm down for a ride. Just kind of by not really intending to, since I'm Mr. Ghost Story guy. Turns out I've ended up visiting a handful of really interesting places that have really unique UFO theories behind them. As always, I love starting out with kind of an icebreaker question that is just 100% off topic. What is your most rewatched movie? What movie do you watch over and over again and you just can't get enough of? And Dan Malone starts off right away, continuing to blur the line as people already get confused the difference between archaeology and paleontology. He says all of the Jurassic Park movies. Lulu Ramirez Galvez says Grease. Interesting. First, I am getting shocked in my ear like crazy as soon as I went live. That's UFO. That's why I was stuttering and stammering more than usual. I was getting electrocuted through my head. Scott stutters. The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. Really? The Don Knotts movie? That's awesome. If so, that's good. Good on ya. Iris, probably Labyrinth. Princess Bride is up there too. Yeah, both heavy, great picks. Abigail, all the Harry Potter movies. Pete Holliker says Step Brothers. There's something about Will Ferrell movies. I'm a fan of them. They don't have to be good, but they are always so quotable and therefore rewatchable. Amanda Lee says Spirited Away or The Shining. Both wonderful paranormal picks, and Spirited Away is one. It's been too long since I've seen it. It is a great film, and yeah, it's been on my to rewatch list for a long time now. Brad Hume, tough question. Maybe Army of Darkness. Awesome, Bruce Campbell. Pat Gilbert says Big Jake, Shawshank, Josie Wales, and True Grit. First off, Shawshank. Has anybody ever been channel surfing, skipped by TNT usually, and Shawshank is on, and have you continued to channel surf? No. You stop. You stop right there, and no matter where you are, you watch it from there to the end. My stepbrother Ryan says Dark Knight Rises, which is a controversial pick in my opinion. As the guy that worked on The Dark Knight, it is so much better than Dark Knight Rises. Sarah Silence, Winter Soldier, or Notting Hill. Now there's some variety. Winter Soldier or Notting Hill. That's awesome. Bart Whedon, and good to see you again, and good to actually see you over the weekend. Good, the bad, the ugly. Great pick. I'm glad somebody mentioned this. Tim Triggs mentions Caddyshack. Absolutely, that was going to be one that I mentioned. Caddyshack is just one of the greatest, most quotable comedies of all time. Brian Von Soffel mentioned Spaceballs, and this is one of the reasons I actually brought this up, because Spaceballs is on Netflix, and that is one of my rewatchable movies. You can watch that movie a million times. Yes, it's Mel Brooks, you're gonna have some really groaner jokes in there, but like dad joke style, that they're still entertaining. But then you have Pizza the Hut. You've got John Candy. Anything with John Candy is a winner, and just brings joy. And once upon a time, I actually dated a girl, and she said that I don't like the movie Spaceballs, and that's when I knew, yes, I can walk away from right now and know that I'm not leaving anything behind. Blade 2 and Dune on his list as well. Matty Eberly, shout out to Matty. He's a guy that I worked with on The Dark Knight, and his older brother Mikey. Really awesome couple of guys. But he says Ghostbusters, excellent. And The Predator, good supernatural comedy and supernatural action suspense there. I also like to shout out some other people that are creating really cool content. Check out the See You on the Other Side podcast, which they do a weekly show, and they've been doing it for quite a long time, where pop culture meets the paranormal, and isn't that where we are right now? I just wanted to share my favorite episode of theirs is with Ryan Sprague, and that's episode 124. He tells a whole bunch of good UFO encounter, UFO sighting stories, and maybe the most intense one I've ever heard takes place at a drive-in in Ohio, where all these people are watching the screen, and then suddenly a UFO slowly passes over, obviously pulls focus from the movie-going process. And finally, like I said, I called him Jim. Sorry about that. Jeff Woolwine. Again, he's doing all sorts of paranormal investigation down in Arizona, in the Phoenix area. He actually is one of the Phoenix Lights eyewitnesses. So he has his own footage of that really famous event. But he's been doing a ton of really unique historical research looking at petrographs. What can those tell us? He's got a really interesting website called Petroglyphs in the Sky, and I've got a link to an hour-long presentation he gives where he does some really, really deep dive historical research into the history of Phoenix to try to understand what we're seeing in the sky today. And he's got some, I'm not going to spoil any of it, but he's got some really unusual, or at least not what you would assume. Lights in the sky, we all think they're spacecraft. He does not. He thinks it's something a little bit different. And you're doing some really intense research, Jeff and Pamela, and you're sharing it. So keep on that good fight. And hello to Lisa Van Buskirk, the ghost host with the most out of Madison, who just waved her way in here. And Lisa, I'll give you... Oh, actually, I want to have everybody chime in. Have you ever seen anything weird in the sky? It doesn't necessarily have to be UFO, but just anything eye-catching, whether it was a remarkable shooting star or some other explainable astrophenomena. I'll definitely share mine. And if anybody hasn't chimed in yet over what your most rewatched movie is, do that. And actually, now's good timing since Lisa's here. For me, it's definitely has to be Rocky Horror Picture Show. I mean, one person mentioned Grease. I thought there was going to be more musicals because it's kind of fun to rewatch movies that have a lot of music in them, especially when the music rocks. We do a little bit of a what happened in the news in the last week, and it's actually been quite a lot of things. Unfortunately, not good ones. I'm going to end positive, so stick around for that. But we are, as our daily death count for Corona has been, last week we hit a low of 480. We just slowly kept going down a little bit less every week. We were on the right direction, on the right path. We've seen the cases explode, but the deaths weren't catching up with it yet. And then, well, we caught up. We are over 700 daily deaths today. So it really shows that there is a cause and effect here. And what I always just try to encourage people, just stay safe, because it's getting scary actually out there. According to FoxNews.com, as of an article they posted yesterday, Florida has 54 hospitals at full ICU capacity, only 17% open beds across the entire state. Texas is reporting about 10% beds available. Arizona's at 12, and Georgia, they are reopening a makeshift temporary hospital in a massive convention center of theirs. So it is getting rough all across. Herman Cain has come down. He's been actually hospitalized for the last 2 weeks. A former Republican candidate for president. He's been hospitalized for the last 2 weeks, and still apparently, I guess he's recovering, but he's not in good shape. And Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt has tested positive. He is symptomatic. So far, just kind of mild symptoms, but we'll see how, hope everybody out there gets better that is ill. This is the first time that we've really publicly seen the president wear a face mask, and we've also seen a rise in anti-face mask violence, which is messed up to me. In France, a bus driver tried to ask somebody to put on a mask, and he was beaten to death. 55-year-old guy beaten up by 3 or 4 people, assailants. They were all arrested, thank goodness. Yesterday in Michigan, somebody was asked to put on a face mask, and he ended up stabbing a 77-year-old customer that was in the store. And then, obviously, police were called. He charged the police, was killed. It's getting messed up out there. Positive thing is I got to watch a baseball game today for the first time in a year. It was a scrimmage game, White Sox playing themselves, but still, we're getting closer to opening day, which will be this coming week, which is really nice because the baseball news, and this is going to be really interesting from a COVID standpoint, the baseball news over the last several weeks has just been which players have reported positive or tested positive for COVID, which players are just opting out of the season altogether. There's not a penalty for doing that. For the most part, there have been some big names, not too many really big names, but some big names, and one of them is Buster Posey, a catcher for the Giants, and he's got newborn and prematurely born twins, so he definitely doesn't, he wants to keep himself safe to not bring anything home. Very much the right move. Also, let's be honest, the Giants aren't going to do much this year. Shots fired. More good news. Ending, like I said, with good news. So again, we're getting back to the face mask stuff. I don't see how asking people, if you're coming into my store, please wear a face mask, how that's any different than saying, please don't smoke in my store. It's in the common courtesy of everybody involved. Save yourself, save your loved ones, and total strangers. And for those that want to keep the economy open, 100,000 deaths is not good for the economy. So let's keep the economy open by helping by working together to keep these cases down, and of course the deaths down, and less stress on the hospital staff and all of that. And also do the basic things too. Make sure you get enough sleep, take vitamins. That stuff people aren't really... Joe Rogan, got to give a shout out to him. He's the one that mentioned that. Like, yeah, nobody is talking about how just to be healthy in general. So that's a good idea to do. The really good news, which I've been looking forward to this day to be able to say this on the broadcast, is a COVID vaccine tested in 45 healthy adults in March, and this went over the course of a couple months, by the National Institute of Health, and Moderna Incorporated found encouraging immune system boost, reported in the New England Journal of Medicine. And so that was a successful phase 1. And next is phase 2, where they will test that on 30,000 people. That will still take a couple of months to really see what the effects. There have not been bad side effects. So that is super promising. And that's another thing, that as scary as everything is, we could be close to a vaccine at some point. So you don't want to be the last person to get really sick before the vaccine comes out. So keep yourself and your loved ones healthy now. And now, let's go and tell some good UFO stories. I don't think anybody's written if you've ever seen anything really weird in the sky, but you have a little bit more time for that. Okay, so I will say I've never seen a UFO. I wish I have. I believe that obviously there's life somewhere else in the universe, and who am I to say that it's never come near here? Who's to say that we've never been visited? I don't know. I know the logistics of it from a human standpoint seems undoable, but that's because we're looking at things through our own lens, which who knows how else other life forms work, and other physics, astrophysics. Who knows the tech out there? So the only interesting thing I saw was finally this year. And I was able to not only see it, but I saw it with two of my best friends. So that made it even more awesome and special. But it was Max Tim and John Champion. We were out in Los Angeles at Max's house in Hollywood. I mean, just barely off of Hollywood Boulevard. I was facing south, and this series of lights comes down through the sky at an angle, and I was facing south. From where I was sitting, I thought it was something was landing in Santa Monica or Venice. But apparently people even in San Diego said it was south of them. So it was seen by a whole bunch of people, and it took a few days for the information to come out, but it turned out it was a Delta II rocket that was used to launch a GPS satellite into orbit back in 1989. Finally came crashing down back into our atmosphere. It was definitely a heart-stopping moment. Pamela says, I've seen many in 3 years, including the Phoenix Lights twice. It is very cool. That is very cool. I really wish I could see something like that. And who knows, maybe one day, and maybe when I just watch the replay. I used to be co-host a radio show with Dobie Maxwell, really wonderful comedian, out of Kenosha, Wisconsin, called the Mothership Connection. And we had Joshua P. Warren was on with us one time, and he was a fascinating talk. And he talked about how when Captain Cook landed in Hawaii, the native Hawaiians could not see his ship, could not see the boats come in until there was a much more enlightened Hawaiian elder that kind of had to explain what was coming in. It's just because the technology was so like beyond the realm of possibility for what these other people were seeing, or not seeing, I guess, that somehow there was some mental block that was just obscuring them. But then once the holy man kind of described what was going on, then boom, okay, people's eyes were opened up, if you will. And so he would suggest to people, go out, back in the days we did this, we had film cameras, and just take pictures of the sky, and then at nothing. You're seeing nothing but sky and clouds, but the cameras don't have the bias that our minds do, and maybe something will develop on the photos. And he called it sky fishing. I thought it was such a really neat idea. I've never done it. Actually, I take that back. I've probably done it once or twice with digital cameras, but no luck yet. I think Wendy had a moment. Weirdest thing in the sky she saw was a failed test launch outside San Francisco. Looked like a white cone of light with a blue spiral by it. Super freaky. I've seen the videos of that. That's wild. That would be really, really cool to see as well. You know, even if it's terrestrial, even if it's not unexplained, it's really cool to catch some of these moments. I did live for about 8 years in Los Angeles, and one time I did take a paranormal hike, if you will, into Malibu. And the canyons out there are full of mystery. There's Laurel Canyon, which of course has its rock and roll history, but it's also got a wild and sometimes super grim criminal and paranormal history. There's associations with Houdini and with banditos that were hanged along the current day route. There's Benedict Canyon, which is where the Sharon Tate murders happened, and where a somewhat famous private residence that gets shot in a lot of different paranormal TV shows. That's in that area as well. That's a place that Barry Taff has studied a lot. I've been asked to study it, to do investigations there twice, and I can vouch that it is a really weird place. And then Malibu, oh gosh, and then Rustic Canyon is the place where there's a decaying Nazi compound from World War II that these Nazi sympathizers in America had built. And the idea was that this is where Hitler would continue his invasion. Once he finished with Europe, he would need a home base. So that's in Rustic Canyon. So there's all of these canyons that have these really bizarre, sordid histories on the far left coast. And off the coast of Malibu, if you look on Google Earth, in the ocean, it's about 6.5 miles into the ocean and about 2,000 feet down, there appears to be this huge platform. And a lot of people have theorized that this is an underwater UFO base. And really interesting thing, whether it's related to that or not, people out in that area, the larger island off the coast of California is Catalina Island, people will claim that they see UFOs come up from the ocean, unidentified submerged objects, USOs. And that's just a really fascinating thing as well that a lot of people have seen. But out in Malibu Canyon, there's somebody that has a really out there story about how he came to these conclusions. But his belief is that, I'm saying out there, I'm being judgmental when I say it, but he had a traumatic day. He was a lifeguard. He saved someone's life, so it was a positive traumatic day. But he ended up having this kind of epiphany where he went up into the Malibu canyons and meditated and claimed he met some sort of a spiritual guide of sorts. And after meeting with this guide, he had his eyes open and he saw all of these rock structures around the area that made him believe that these were created by aliens. And what's neat is, I won't deny that these they have an uncanny resemblance to other much more famous structures around the world. They look like very crude versions. So it's almost like, was this an alien testing ground where they honed their skills to then be able to do these carvings and buildings elsewhere? Pamela Woolwine says they're seen at Myrtle Beach over the ocean as well. Yeah, I bet I've heard stories that they're all over the place, and I've never actually been out in the Myrtle Beach area. But I was able to go on this hike, and I did photograph the rocks that this person writes about. Who am I to make any distinctions that they are or are not? But I will definitely be posting them. And if you go to again on the show notes side, there are links so you can see what has been written about before. I was taken on a whirlwind, amazing, wonderful road trip birthday this past December. But one of our stops over in Wisconsin, not, I don't know, it felt like it was a long drive away, but Bensons Hideaway, Campbellsport, Wisconsin, or Dundee, Wisconsin. It must be in a little area of overlapping boundary lines. But it is just this very classic Midwestern fishing shack bar. It's right on a lake, so obviously people go out fishing all day and they come in belly up to the bar, maybe fuel up pre-party before going out there. It is the type of a place with wood paneling from the 70s, except it's also a place that has, I don't know, 5 dozen alien stuffed animals around, all sorts of UFO paraphernalia. And the reason is that this location has a long history with UFO sightings. And just always a lot of fun when you come across stuff like this because it's so unassuming. You go there, and first off, Benson is just a character in and of himself, just a wonderful older guy that runs this bar, and he's so happy to talk about his experience seeing UFOs. He fought in Vietnam. He saw unusual lights in the sky when he was at war. And there was a history of crop circles in this area that I believe date back to his childhood. Yeah, 1947. So again, 47's a big year. Crop circle appears in an oat field on the Ludwig farm, not too far away from this location. 1985, multiple witnesses see a circular object hovering over pasture and scaring a herd of cows. I always love when a paranormal incident is reacted to by animals. Because again, talk about removing the bias. We talked a little bit last week about The site where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre took place, it's now just an open park. The building's destroyed, but dogs freak out there. They don't know the history. They have no idea who Al Capone was. And they don't know about the murders and all that, but they are picking up on something that is still lingering. So 1988 is when Bill Benson and UFO Bob, as he goes by, host the first ever UFO Days. So this, it would have taken place in June. I don't know if it happened this year, June or around July 4th. Hopefully next year it will go and we can go, because I have not been able to attend this event, but it sounds like a blast. 1995 crop circle formed by a flattened interwoven reeds in a marshy area of the lake, which is really close to the Bensons Hideaway. And the really interesting thing when you go there is he's got this binder full of photos that people have taken from the lakefront right outside of the bar. There's a hill, a big hill. I mean, they call it Mount Dundee or Dundee Mountain. It's really not mountain caliber, but for the Midwest it is. But I guess if you stand out there and look in that direction, almost like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that's something that the lights in the sky tend to gravitate towards and fly around for whatever reason. Okay, it's going to get more interesting here. 1998, Bill Benson and 5 others witness a large ball hovering over Dundee Mountain. It vanishes only when 4 fighter jets suddenly fly near it. I don't know if they were flying at it or if just coincidentally they were going near it and the object vanished, whatever the case. 2000, this happened. The next 3 happened actually during UFO days, when you have a whole bunch of people out there with their cameras, telescopes, lawn chairs to sit and tell stories and actually watch the sky. So in the year 2000, UFO days attendees witnessed 2 pyramid-shaped objects over Long Lake join together into a diamond shape and then tumble off silently through the sky. In 2002, again just 2 years later, attendees witnessed 6 glowing and flashing amber spheres in the sky. 2 years later again, 2004, UFO Days attendees witnessed a triangular craft move over their heads with a Y-shaped light pattern on the underside. A lot of these over at the cultofweird.com have video to go along with it, and I'm telling you, they're compelling. I don't know what they are, but it's compelling. It does seem to be an active area. And something that, about getting back to this location, is they allege to have an actual alien in a jar on the premises. How about that for a cliffhanger? Back to Pamela. They search for energy spots, so they follow fault lines. So the fault lines is interesting to bring up because geologists have established that what looks like an underground pad, underwater pad near Malibu is the result of shifting fault lines. So, but it's still a weird looking shape. Again, if you're able to see this, it's very easy to find. Also, I find, as a footnote, I find it interesting that it's not too far from Point Doom, which is where Charlton Heston comes back to find out it was Earth all along in Planet of the Apes. A little movie trivia, but also spacey note. But yeah, it could be an interesting connection of why USOs are seen in that area where we do know that there's tectonic plate shifting activity. So this alien in a jar, I asked to see it because I heard the legend, or I saw in a book actually, that there was allegedly an alien in a jar here at this location. So I'm like, oh, I gotta see this. Would you show it to me? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, don't open it, but here you go. Maybe I shouldn't judge at all. I'll just let you go out to UFO days, let you go out to Benson's. So, and what I love about this guy, Bill, is that he's just a no-nonsense kind of guy. Like, he's not trying to be a showman, play anything up. He just says that, listen, a friend of mine was in a cave out in the American Southwest, came across this body, preserved it in this formaldehyde, and he doesn't know what it is, and he just doesn't feel like he should have it. Because if anybody saw him go into a secure place and walk out with something, he would like to pass it off. Most people would say, well, I don't want it. You know, if you think you're in danger having it, why are you giving it to me? It's kind of rude. But Bill just said that's the story. And eventually, somebody, again, allegedly, and he'll say that he doesn't know exactly who this person was, but somebody who meet very Men in Black type regalia came asking to see the alien in the jar. And he said, yeah, well, here you go. And he went into the back room with it. He had no idea if the guy took samples, if he just looked at it, if he opened the jar. But whatever the case, he didn't came back, put the jar back on the bar, and left without saying a word. So who knows? I think it would be a very sly prank if it was one of his friends getting a friend to dress up, because it was kind of, he didn't go very far with the prank if it was just a prank. So so was it somebody from the government? Was it a Men in Black? Was it some entity actually following up on the legend that there's some alien material at this location? I find it fascinating and just fun, if nothing else. That place is really awesome, and I cannot wait to go back. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about UFOs as cited by pilots. And there are a couple of really great ones. Another shout out to See You on the Other Side, as I was on their St. Patrick's Day episode, and I was trying to find all sorts of legends and lore to talk about when it came to Ireland. And I thought, everybody always tells ghost stories, which of course I'm down for as well. But I wonder if there's any good and famous UFO sightings in Ireland. I don't really know if there are specifically super famous ones the way we have, Roswell or whatnot. And you can find this recording as well, the communication back and forth between a pilot who asks, is there anything in the sky with me right now? Because I had a very bright object pass by at a really intense speed, and I'm not seeing anything on my radar, or I'm not seeing any indicators. Ground control confirms that there's nothing up there with them. But then another, I think it's a Virgin Airlines pilot, says they just flew by us too. Two items that went by nearby, whatever it was, multiple objects following the same sort of trajectory, intensely bright, and also we're glad to hear that we're not the only ones who saw this. So obviously these are people that are veterans of the sky. They know what's normal and not in the sky, and it was something that spooked them. We have in Chicago a pretty famous sighting not all that long ago at O'Hare, where a lot of people that were working baggage handlers, working on the field, on the tarmac, they saw a UFO in the sky over O'Hare, one of the busiest airports in the world, and then it shot up through the clouds and left, like it punched a hole in the clouds. Whatever heat, because you think it was probably heat that it would give off to raise the relative humidity, or I guess lower the relative humidity, raise the temperature of the air around it so that the clouds couldn't form anymore, and it just left this big window where in the sky of this very uniformly cloudy day. And I talked to a friend of mine who also worked for United at that time and asked him if he saw it. He said, no, unfortunately I didn't, but I've talked to the people that did see it, and man, they're not messing around. Like, it happened. The last one, oh yeah, back to Arizona, and Pamela. Pamela and Jeff, you might have insight on this one. There's a pretty engaging story, again, just a couple of years old. It involved multiple Arizona pilots seeing a UFO at kind of nearly similar time. Okay, so first was a private plane. It was a Learjet radioing the tower. The pilot said, was anybody above us that passed us like 30 seconds ago? Negative, the air traffic controller said. Okay, the pilot said something did. Minutes later, the FAA controller alerted an American Airlines plane that was flying in the area, according to a release from the FAA. American 1095, let me know if you have anything pass over you in the next 15 miles. Which the pilot responded, let you know if anything passes over. American 1095 affirmative, the controller said. We had an aircraft in front of you that reported something passing over, and we don't have any targets, so just let me know if you see anything pass over. Okay, the pilot said. Shortly after, the pilot radioed air traffic controller, also reporting the mysterious object. It's American 1095, yeah, something just passed over us. I don't know what it was, but it was 2,000 to 3,000 feet above us, and yeah, passed over right over top of us. The American Airlines jet was an Airbus A321 flying from San Diego to Dallas. The American Airlines pilot said that it left a big echo. A big reflection, they said. Big reflection, and it was traveling, again, several thousand feet above us and moving in the opposite direction. So you would assume not a weather balloon. Again, these are people that would probably be able to identify a weather balloon or not. But it wasn't just something that was floating up in the air. It was traveling as well. So who knows? I always love those types of reports. Seem to have a lot of credibility with me, because again, these are people that are used to seeing stuff in the sky and know if there's something to report or not. This is a story that was on my American, now it's going to be part of American Ghost Walks in the near future, but my LA Hauntings Ghost Tour. I took people from downtown LA through Hollywood Boulevard and back, again, passing the Jim Henson studio, telling all sorts of great stories. And I love to, it's very primarily, it was very primarily his history and ghost story based, but I always tried to keep some of everything in there. Like, did you know, not all that long ago, like barely 100 years ago, maybe even less than 100 years ago, there was a pretty strong belief that there was an ancient and now extinct species of reptilian type creatures, of lizard type people that lived underneath Los Angeles in the many natural, and there really are many natural caves that kind of intertwine throughout underneath Los Angeles. So yeah, I would like to tell cryptid stories when I could, and I would tell UFO stories, and nothing beat the Battle of Los Angeles. So, setting the stage, Battle of Los Angeles. We are talking World War II era. This is the time. It's post attack on Pearl Harbor, so people are watching the sky and might be a little extra trigger happy. And you know, if there are Japanese forces coming in from the west, there were actually bombs dropped on continental U.S. A lot of people don't know that. Really fascinating stories. They didn't do, obviously, catastrophic damage, but they did do damage. There were lighthouses that were attacked. They employed these balloons that would carry an explosive device and was meant to pop or just drop that explosive device once it reached mainland USA. And some of these devices did actually work. I can't remember where I learned that, but it was a really fascinating little footnote in World War II history. So eventually, south of Los Angeles, somebody sees some object in the sky. This is after dark, so it's really difficult to see what it is that people are seeing. But there's this object flying over. In total precaution, Army fighters are scrambled. Obviously, anti-artillery guns are put into action immediately, keeping an eye on things. There are really amazing stories about the military calling different people in Los Angeles, including in Culver City, where I used to live, and saying, hey, go outside and tell us what you see in the sky. There's some object that we can't identify, but it's over your neighborhood right now. So people going up and trying to make something out and not being able to really do so. Eventually they do open fire, and there's a very famous photo of all of these different searchlights converging on a singular object, and you see all this anti-aircraft artillery flying through the air. I believe it was 1,500 rounds of anti-aircraft ammunition is discharged at this object, and nothing is ever recovered. The eventual excuse, so we say weather balloon a lot of times in shorthand now, but at this point in time, we had a defensive idea that we were engaging in over a lot of U.S. Factories, where we had a huge weather balloon type of thing tethered over the buildings, so that if a bomber plane were to go through, they'd snare the bomber, or at least obstruct their view. And so the idea was that maybe one of these things got loose and then floated its way up the coastline. If that's the case, it took a lot of bullets, a lot of anti-aircraft bullets to not shoot it down. It's a very interesting part of U.S. military history and conspiracy theory ideas, which, hey, listen, I don't know the answers, but people did get injured, people did die. Car accidents happened because people found themselves suddenly driving underneath an air battle in the continental U.S. I think that's been something that people forgot, even when a movie came out called Battle of Los Angeles, maybe partially because it didn't do all that well in theaters, that people didn't know that was actually based on some bit of true story. And of course the movie tagline was that last time it was just the warning, or last time it was just the beginning, or something like that. All right, to finish it off here, Coral Castle in Homestead, Florida. This is a location I went to a little over a year ago. Happy wedding anniversary to my cousin Cody, because I was down there for that. Really amazing story, really weird location. I think that's just all you can say about it. It's not all you can say about it, but you have to start there, because it's a place that's so weird. It was featured on Ancient Aliens, and with good cause, because it is just such an unusual story and location. Early 1900s, a guy named Edward Leedsclan lived down here, and this is, by the way, Homestead, Florida is about 45 minutes south of Miami, so we are talking very South Florida. And I highly recommend anybody that wants to check this place out. It's worth the ticket price, and yes, it is kind of a roadside attraction type thing, but it's still amazing to go to. He took this bizarre sedimentary rock that makes up the landscape there. They call it coral castle. It looks like coral. It's not actually coral. It's a type of limestone. But he was able to quarry this limestone and sculpt it into this weird rock garden type of thing. He was apparently jilted. He bought a wedding ring for, and I don't know, I think he was a bit older, but not probably still not appropriate in this day and age. He bought an engagement ring for a 16-year-old girl who shunned him, and he got very depressed and decided to turn all of his attention and energy and creative energy into making something fantastic, and that's absolutely what he did. He worked on this location for decades, mining on his own property these stone slabs and then building them up. So it's this big fenced-in, walled-in area by this coral. And then he has all of these sculptures and whatnot inside of it as well. And including, now it's eroded, unfortunately, so it doesn't work anymore. But he even had a revolving door made out of the same material, which was really impressive because this material we're talking about is extraordinarily heavy. Very heavy. The stones there are heavier than the stones at Stonehenge. And he was an individual guy. He weighed about 100 pounds and was 5 feet tall. This Lithuanian immigrant, and he would do it kind of under the secrecy of night. And this little guy solo was quarrying this material and building these impossible structures. And again, we're talking, I guess all in all, he moved over 1,000 tons of this material, but some of the individual pieces are like 60 tons. I think some even more than that. And again, I think the Stonehenge rocks are about 20 tons, which, I mean, that's also amazing. The speculation, you get to conspiracy theories and talk is this guy alien somehow? Is he using alien technology somehow? Because we only ever see him with these like wooden tripods, the pictures of construction. His tools are very rudimentary. And he ended up publishing a number of pamphlets. His work was in electrical engineering. He gives some clues, and one of the really bizarre things, and maybe he was just a next level genius, some of his ideas are just that, like, to approach gravity like a magnet. And you can find the opposite pole, and then magnets repel instead of pull. And so that's like how he cryptically described, the phrase he used was making these huge rocks weightless. What? We haven't been... You're basically talking about anti-gravity machinery at this point. Another story that comes out of it, which I don't know if it's true or not, I hope it is. Apparently, if people would like peer over the wall and he would see them, he would just go to bed for the night. He would stop working, just in protest. He did not want to be observed building at all, which is shady in and of itself. But apparently, 2 people were able to witness him doing this, building this bizarre area, and they claimed he did it with music. Music can change the world, obviously. But yeah, he was able to use sound waves somehow to make these objects move around. Who knows if that's real? I love the idea. I hope it's true. In broad strokes, that is the Coral Castle down in Homestead, Florida. Okay, so last story, and like I said, I don't have my own, but this is one of my favorite stories to tell that is not my own. And but it is close. It's a friend's story. And so a friend and his wife were out in Vegas, and the friend, obviously being a nerdy guy like me, doesn't want to just hit the machines and go see a show. He wants to go to Area 51, see what we can see. And it's still a long ways away, Area 51 is, from the Strip. So it's a journey. You have to be dedicated to it. And unfortunately, he kind of drags his wife along, who is not super keen on it. But she humors him. And as they finally start to get closer and closer, and they are in remote, dark desert, what happens to them over and over again, the closer they get, is they'll be alone on this isolated, totally blackened part of highway in the middle of the desert, and then boom, headlights will turn on behind them, and then a black SUV will just go flying past them. And it's really obviously an intimidation tactic, saying that, hey, we can see you when you can't see us. The intimidation certainly, I'm sure, worked to some degree, but they kept going. They come up to what appears to be a disc-shaped craft parked off the side of the road, not all that far from the road. It's illuminated, just like you're picturing a 1950s movie. The ramp is down, and you can see beings. He didn't call them grays, he didn't call them humans, but he saw bipedal people, beings, bringing objects in and out of this craft. And he and his wife were staring at it like, is that what? This is happening? We're actually we're going to Area 51 and we see this? And while they're watching it, then boom, a light appears about the size of a basketball. This orb appears hovering over their hood. So, of course, that draws their attention. They're looking at that. And then it begins to drift away, drift in front of them further. So he puts the car back into gear and starts to coast towards it, keeping up with it. And then it accelerates, and he accelerates. And soon he finds himself, as this thing continues to accelerate and he keeps chasing it, he's going over 100 miles an hour down this darkened highway, just flying after this thing. And then the light shuts off. So, just gone. And he realizes at that point that that thing was sent out here to make us leave, to lure us away, and it worked. And you see stuff like this happen in the paranormal community too sometimes, where you're at a haunted site and a ghost light, which is described in a similar way, usually smaller than a basketball shaped, but appears out in the woods somewhere. You are at a cemetery. I always hate to quote them, but this was actually a really, really engaging moment on Ghost Adventures, where they're at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Chicago, and they're trying to do an investigation in the cemetery, and they see a ghost light out in the woods, which is a very haunted woods too, in its own right. And I've got all sorts of stories of my own about that. And you see on camera this obvious light is appearing, and they think it's maybe somebody with a flashlight hiking up to them, but then they verify that it's not, and they keep going after it, and then they realize that they're in the middle of this woods, really far away from the cemetery, and that's when they realize that, wow, this thing was just trying to get us out of the cemetery, and it did a good job. Pamela, I can't believe I was going to bring this up, but yeah, Pamela mentions Skinwalker Ranch has been seeing UFOs also. That location, such a mysterious location. I've looked into it a tiny bit, and I've watched 2 episodes maybe of the show. I want to finish the series. It's always been a really mysterious location. And actually, I did an episode. Actually, the next episode that I'm going to edit and post on YouTube is about paranormal television, and I meant to talk about Skinwalker Ranch on it, so I'll talk about it here. I think it's very easy to be skeptical of Skinwalker Ranch, the TV show, because, I mean, I don't know. I guess as soon as anything's on TV, people are going to be skeptical of it, understandably, because people need ratings and selling ad space and keep people watching, that kind of a thing. But at the same time, if you have a location that's incredibly mysterious and has a lot of odd history, and it's off limits, you can't go to it, what would the best case scenario be? Well, that somebody with a lot of money buys it and then makes as much of it public as possible, which is exactly what's going on with that show. So I really hope that they're a very legit show. I know that area is fascinating, and yeah, I can't wait to watch the rest of the series. If you guys have been watching, please do tell friends about this. I'm doing it just because it's fun to do. I'm definitely not selling ad space or anything like that. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but really, it's just a lot of fun to do. And if you can share this with other friends that are really interested in the paranormal, have their own stories, and I'm also very much always up for taking your suggestions. Pamela says it looks the same as the ones in Arizona. Also, the type of UFOs seen at Skinwalker are similar to the ones in Arizona. Cool. I'm very curious for you two to go check out that, oh gosh, what was it called? Cult of Weird or something like that. That has some of the footage from the UFO days out in Dundee, Wisconsin. I was very impressed by those videos. I was not expecting to see things as odd as they were. So I'd love your take on them. Chris Price said he watched the whole series and found it very interesting. Meanwhile, Pamela didn't like the show, but the UFO, I think, is legit, and they're using it for monetary gain and ratings. Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to know when you're not the one on set. And again, I go into this a lot on that episode on paranormal television. You just got to go on hope. And I love watching a lot of these shows because even if the investigation is really bunk, it's really played up or whatever, it might give you some good leads on places that you didn't know about before. So if nothing else, there's that. Thank you, everybody, for watching. As always, stay safe. Settings here in my area all the time. Kettle Moraine. Okay, so Dana, if you haven't, I don't know how long you've been with us, but I talk about Dundee Mountain, which is right next to Kettle, which I meant to mention earlier. And if you guys haven't seen it yet, Finding Jay is a long documentary all about Jay Bachochin, who was the guy that I did the lacrosse drownings investigation, paranormal investigation with. Actually, he did the investigation. I directed the documentary. He's been going into the Kettle and having unbelievable paranormal experiences, missing time, cryptid encounters. I went along for 2 stories that I'm going to probably do a whole episode about because they were some of the most extreme, bizarre things I'd ever been in. And it was the Kettle. I keep trying to wrap it up and keep wanting to talk more. The Kettle is such a bizarre place because I think whoever goes in there and has an encounter, you're viewing it through your lens. Like, Jay is out there looking for Bigfoot, so he's seeing Bigfoot all over the place. I come from the ghost side, so I'm saying, like, well, that's some sort of a ghost light, and there's some sort of spirit here. Demonologists could very easily see demons there, because he and I together witnessed glowing red eyes. But the Kettle is a mysterious place, and that does go all the way up to Dundee Mountain, where Benson's Hideaway is. All right, one more time. What'syourghoststory.com is the website. What's Your Ghost Story on all social media. Thank everybody for being here. I'll be right back here next Wednesday at 8 p.m. to talk about, I'll come up with something, but you can send me suggestions as well. I hope everybody stays safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and I will see you next week.